Test, 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 test. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
We'll be starting here in a few minutes.
Yeah. I think first time I was here. Probably 1 or 2 years or something. Hey, how you doing, sir? One of the guys all dressed up. Step, I don't think Mr. stepping over there. They're gonna be here. They're gonna march the way. Yeah. That's all. I think where the tree line might get the driest. Rifle or anything, and the rest of the There he goes. One of the unusual things.
Everybody please stand as we post colors. Pump. Post the colors. Honor guard. To the front. Face. Dress right. Honor guard. Dress right. Order. Arms. Over 2 years ago, 4 compatriots got together with a vision to preserve our homeland, our history, and our traditions. We also maintain several abandoned cemeteries with special care and attention. We also take on special requests for projects from anyone who may ask and require. To perform these tasks, maintenance and upkeep of equipment is essential. We work from donations from good people as yourself for this labor of love. As such, none of our membership are paid for the work, nor will we ask. If you wish to donate, our donation jar is located right here. I thank you in advance. Now we're going to do the pledges. First to the U.S. flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now to the North Carolina flag. I salute the flag of North Carolina and pledge to the Old North State love, loyalty, and faith. And now to the Confederate flag. I salute the Confederate flag with affection, reverence, and undying devotion to the cause for which it stands. Please be seated. A banner, a bright banner of freedom, with pride I display thee. The fair flag of the Southland, with love I behold thee. Gleaming above us in reverence and honor, emblem of the Southland, the symbol of the pride which shall wave over the Southerner's home and over the Southerner's grave. And now at this time, I'd like to introduce our chairman, our Grand Poobah, Brian Allman. He's going to talk about the story of the Flat Rock 7. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our memorial service here at Flat Rock Cemetery. The reason I'm standing here in front of y'all today is we've been doing this for about 5 years. And I stand before you in the most humble occasion on these hallowed grounds of Flat Rock Cemetery, as I have the last several years, to keep this story from slipping into the cracks of time like tears and rain. I'm going to start today talking about Ansel Dykes, is the one at the very end over here. Ansel joined September the 2nd, 1861 in Company B, 34th Regiment, North Carolina troops. They were called the Sandy Run Yellow Jackets. These men were from the company from Rutherford and Cleveland County. They mustered into service at Fort Fisher in High Point, North Carolina, and departed for Goldsboro, North Carolina, and then on into Virginia. They joined in the defense of the southern homeland. Some hurried, some looked back, some weren't quite so sure. They were brothers, cousins, uncles, and nephews and neighbors. Ansel was about a month from being 20 when he left his young pregnant wife to join the Confederacy. He fought in every main battle of the 34th until he found himself sick in a hospital in Richmond, Virginia, where he received a medical discharge on June 5th, 1862. The medical reason was a broke-down constitution. He rejoined February the 28th, 1863, and served through April the 9th, 1865, and signed a parole of honor in Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia on April the 12th, along with his brother that he hadn't seen in quite a while, signed the parole of honor. And they listened to General Lee told his men, go home, resume your occupation, obey the law, and become a good citizen as you was a soldier. One of the last letters that Ansel had wrote to his wife Mary, he stated that I've not said anything about this. There was an accident that happened the other morning. I got up to make a fire and started to fall and hit my foot against something and tore a piece of skin off about the size of a silver dollar from the ball of my foot. And I want y'all to remember that. I can't walk except on my heel. Ansel started walking back to the old North State on April the 13th with his brother Joseph and several other Confederate soldiers. They made it back to the Catawba River, which is right down here, into this road down here, on April the 21st, which was 188 miles in 8 days, walking on the heel of your foot. And they only had 50 miles left before they could make it to Rutherford County, where they resided from. And he would also be reunited with his wife and one child that he's never seen before. Ansel and his brother Joseph, along with 5 others, followed the railroad tracks from Appomattox Courthouse, hoping to find shelter in big government depots along the way in Greensboro, where when they reached Greensboro, they noticed the railroad tracks were destroyed in both directions. This was called Sherman's neckties. When they got to the Salisbury prison on April the 16th, they saw a smoldering prison that was burned by General Stoneman's raiders. On April 12th, by the time they got to Charlotte, on April the 21st, the long bridge that crossed over the river was no longer there.
The ford is usually easy to cross, was now swollen from heavy spring rain. We know about the heavy spring rain, right? There was about 20 or 30 soldiers with paroles of honor, just like this in their pocket, said they'd be a good person, anxiously waiting on the hillside for the water to recede, so they could go home, and all while witnessing General Stoneman's raiders destroying the area with a small skirmish with the home guard. Finally, on April the 25th, Ansel and his brother and 5 others pursued a young black boy about 12 years old to take them across the river on a small raft pulled by a mule and a rope. They were about halfway across when the raft overturned from the swift yellow water and debris because of the dam that had been destroyed by General Stoneman. Several men were washed away and the others went under and never came back due to their weakened state. Ansel was the only one that made it to the shore. When he saw his brother still in the water struggling, Ansel dove back in and tried to save him, but they both drowned. Ansel was not to be found. Per an article in the Gaston Gazette on June 27, 1913, some 48 years later, while boatmen were excavating, or workmen was excavating a boathouse, workmen found a skeleton on the surface of the riverbank. The elder citizens of the town recalled a soldier drowning at the surrender in 1865, after the surrender. His remains were taken to the Flat Rock Cemetery and buried near the other 6 soldiers. Here's what led up to their demise. April 12th, Stoneman Raiders burned Salisbury Prison. April 13th, Stoneman Raiders moved to Statesville and burned the railroad depot and the Iredell Express newspaper. And what that about the Iredell Express, anyone don't know, the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence was printed on that printing press, and Stoneman's Raiders knew that was a cherished thing for North Carolina. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated April 15th. April 15th, Stoneman Raiders occupied Lincolnton. April 16th, Stoneman Raiders occupied the Dallas Courthouse. April 16th, Stoneman Raiders scouted the Catawba River. April 18th, President Jefferson Davis arrived in Charlotte and had his last full cabinet meeting of the Confederacy, then departed on April 26th with the Confederate Treasury by wagon trying to reach Texas. On April 19th, Stoneman's Raiders burned the Charlotte and South Carolina Railroad Bridge over the Catawba River down in Fort Mill and captured several muskets and 2 cannons, which were destroyed and dumped into the river on April 19th. Stoneman Raiders burned the Tuckasegee Ford, Betty's Ford, Cowan Ford Bridge. Before they could burn the Rossell's Ferry Bridge, which is the one over on 16, they pulled up the planks to keep the Yankees from crossing. They also burned the Confederate State Acid Works, where they made percussion caps at Tuckasegee Ford. And the North Carolina Manufacturing Gunpowder Mill is on the Charlotte side of the river, where the Whitewater Center is now located. They also burned the Armin cotton mill that was located at the dam in Mount Holly, right over here. The same day, the skirmish with the Mecklenburg County Home Guard, the Rossell's Ferry Crossing, which at the Rossell's Ferry Cross in the same area as this Flat Rock. This all took place while Sherman and Johnson signed the armistice at Bennett's Place in Durham on April the 17th to work out terms of surrender, just 9 days after Lee's surrender on April 19th at Appomattox Courthouse. The Secretary of War, Ed Stanton, instructed General Stoneman, continue your hostilities until President Jefferson Davis is captured. On April the 26th, Stoneman Raiders continued destroying bridges and buildings, trying to capture Jefferson Davis and the Confederate cabinet, which they thought were in complicity with Abraham Lincoln's murder. And therefore, there was a $100,000 reward back in 1865 that was offered by President Andrew Johnson, along with the chance to capture the Confederate treasury. We all know that Davis was captured by Michigan and Wisconsin cavalry on May 10th, 1865, in Abbeville, Georgia. Ironically, just 2 years after Stonewall Jackson crossed over the river to rest under the shade of the trees. Here's the names of the Flat Rock Seven. Corporal Dury Dobbins Price, Private Ansel Newton Dicus, Private Joseph J. Dicus, Private A. Green, Private John Green, Private John R. Owens, and Private James Blanton. In closing, I would like to quote Robert Louis Dabney, chaplain for General Stonewall Jackson. Sir, have no reason to be ashamed of your Confederate dead. See that they have no reason to be ashamed of you.
Thank you, Brian. Hold on a second, I lost my place. Our honoree today is Sergeant Aaron Leonidas DeArmond. To speak of him is our special guest speaker, Mr. Tim Green of the 30th North Carolina Regimental Reenactors.
Thanks everybody for having me up. I am absolutely thrilled to be here. I did not know the cemetery existed, and I did not know the story of these gentlemen until Brian contacted me, and I'm going to have to do some more research. Well, I have two namesakes buried here that I'll have to do some research to find out if they're related. Just a little bit of background about me. I am local. I am living in Charlotte, but I was born and raised in Kings Mountain. And of course, Kings Mountain is full of history itself. The Battle of Kings Mountain was fought there during the Revolutionary War, and I discovered through my family history that I had an ancestor that fought there. He was a Tory. He was on the wrong side, but he was there and was captured and later escaped. But then he switched sides to join the fight for our independence. A couple of chapters I wanted to read from the Old Testament, and one from the Old Testament, one from the New Testament. In Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 7, it says, "Remember the days of long ago, think about generations past, ask your father, and he will inform you, inquire of your elders, and they will tell you." And then in John 15:13, it says, "There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends," and that's what these gentlemen did. Wanted to give you a brief history of the 30th North Carolina. As was mentioned, I am a reenactor. I am in the 30th North Carolina troops. I've been doing reenacting for over 30 years. The 30th was completed its organization in Camp Mangum near Raleigh in October of 1861. Most of the men were from the eastern part of the state, raised in counties in the eastern part. The only one company that was raised in the western part was from Mecklenburg County, and it was Company K. They did serve in the Department of North Carolina, first assigned to General Anderson's brigade, Ramser's brigade, and then Cox's brigade in the Army of Northern Virginia. And the 30th saw action at a number of major battles throughout the war. 7 days, South Mountain, Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, Bristow, Mine Run, Kelly's Ford, the Wilderness, Spotsylvania Courthouse, Cold Harbor, Monocacy, Snickers Gap, 3rd Winchester, Cedar Creek, Petersburg, and Sailor's Creek, and then finally at Appomattox, where it surrendered 6 officers and 147 men. I was able to acquire the letters of Sergeant DeArmond through the University of North Carolina. Also, Brian sent me a disc with a copy of the letters on there as well, so I thank him for that, and also thank the UNC system for sending me the letters. If you hadn't seen the letters, you'll be sure I'll be glad to share them with you give me an email and I'll be glad to send them to you or send you a copy. Thanks to Martha Riggins Brown, who's the great-granddaughter of Sergeant DeArmond. providing letters and the diaries that he wrote to Prosperity. Sergeant Yarman, he enlisted at the age of 35. He was captured at Sharpsburg. He was paroled in September after Sharpsburg. He was present or accounted for until he was wounded in the arm in Fredericksburg, Virginia in December of 1862. He was captured at Kelly's Ford, Virginia in November of 63. He was confined at Point Lookout, Maryland, and paroled from Point Lookout in March of 1864, where he was transferred to Virginia and for exchange. And then he was wounded at Snickers Gap, Virginia. Of his letters, Sergeant Yarman, only 10 of them survive the letters that Ms. Brown had in her possession. And so those letters are in the library at UNC Chapel Hill. And all the letters are addressed to his wife, Nancy Jane Yarman. At the age of 27, Sergeant Yarman married her. They lived in Providence area of Mecklenburg County. He was a farmer. He had French Huguenot ancestors that came to America through England and settled in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Then his family migrated to North Carolina in 1761. Now that's important because he talks about that in one of his letters. His diaries chronicle a journey totaling over 1,200 miles and tell of his presence at 2nd Manassas, Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, campaigns of the Potomac, including Antietam, Gettysburg, Washington, D.C. And for his history, a little bit of background, he was born February 1827. He married Nancy Jane in September of 1854. They had 5 children, several of which died at young age. All told, I said 5 children. And according to Ms. Brown, Sergeant Yarman, through using modern road maps, indicate that Sergeant Yarman marched in excess of 1,200 miles, excluding the meanderings and maneuverings during battle. He covered that distance in about a 2-year period. The time was deducted for the 6 weeks in the hospital when he was first wounded, his prisoner's camp time, and winter camp, and several months of furlough. He covered 1,200 miles on foot in less than 1 year with all of his accoutrements. Like I said, there's 10 letters in that collection, but they don't start until 15 months into his service. And in his letter of January 1863, he says, "I've never missed writing once a week to you since I left home, but I've not received one letter from you since I left home." And that was one I sent by Matthew Edwards. Matthew Edwards was his brother-in-law. So even though there's 10 letters in the library, he evidently wrote many more than that, and hopefully they're still around somewhere, but that's all we know of that are preserved in history. In many of his letters, he speaks of his health, God's protection for him and his family, disease in the hospital, tending the farm, love his family, blessings from God. He requests provisions a number of times from his family, and he acknowledges the receipt of tobacco and clothing. And he also speaks several times of not ever wanting to face battle again. Most often he speaks of impatience to receive letters and pleads for letters from his wife and others. In his letter of March of 1863, he says, "If my relations cares that little of me, I need not care for them." So apparently there's some depression and sorrow and that he's feeling on the battlefield from not receiving word from his family. In his letter of January of 63, he talks about his first wounding. First is, when I fell into the line of battle, our division had the support of battery. I had been being behind the battery for about 3 hours under the fire of the Yankees. All that time when our division was ordered to rise up and take arms. Just at that time when I was taking my musket, I was struck by grape shot, which cracked my arm just below my shoulder, about 4 inches from my shoulder. But I feel well now, as I ever did in my life, and I do feel as hearty as ever did in my life, and I have great reason to thank my Heavenly Father for his kind blessings that he bestowed upon me. I do pray that he will protect me all of my trials throughout my life. And in many of his letters, he does speak of his friends and acquaintances that he knows from Mecklenburg County. And in his letter number 6, and that's the numbering system that the UNC system used, he details the Battle of Chancellorsville. Now, this is the one most detailed letters that Sergeant Yarman wrote about his experiences, and this is the one I like the most. And I'll read it for you. It says, "My dear, I hardly know what to write you, for I will tell you I do feel very thankful to Almighty God for His kind providence that He has spared my life to pass through to another hard-fought battle. My dear, I have never had experienced such times in all my life. We have been on picket for 5 days, nights, and the last night we were on picket. The Yankees crossed the river at Fredericksburg, and we commenced firing our battery on the Yankees. And they recrossed the river, went up the river ford to U.S. crossings about 10 miles above Fredericksburg. Then our army had to march up there Friday morning, and we landed there about 11 o'clock in the morning. And then the battle commenced. We fought all that day, and on Saturday, old Stonewall ordered a flank movement to be made on Saturday. We were compelled to make a forced march to the left wing of our lines, and late Saturday evening we opened fire on them, and the battle commenced again, and we run out of their breastworks. That evening and that night we lay on the Yankees' battleground, and as the sun rose in our heads on Sabbath morning, we were shelled by the Yankees. And at that time the command was going to force forward. That was the cry by our generals, and we made desperate charge upon the Yankees and captured their breastworks. After a desperate, hard-fought battle, and at that time Milton Ray, which is James Milton Ray, and Wiley Harris was shot. Ray was shot between the eyes. After we chased them out of that breastwork, I thought we had routed them completely. But we had hardly commenced driving them, but pursued them till they got our generals where they wanted us. Then they opened the batteries upon us, and then we were ordered to make a charge upon the battery. And it was that awful time. The Yankees opened fire upon us with canister and grape shot. And I tell you, it did slay our men rapidly. But thanks be to God, I was shielded from by His almighty power and by His assistance. And our battery caused their Yankee battery to cease firing. We captured their battery and hoisted a flag of truce. There was about 2,000 of Yankees surrendered. At that time, we were charging the battery. Robert Barnes was shot by grape shot in his bowels. He lived 1 day and 1 night. Jake Witherspoon received a wound in his thigh with a grape shot, and he's still living, but he's suspected to live. Not live. His thighs broke. And I did check the records. Mr. Witherspoon was wounded, and he died May 7th in 1863. Oh, my dear, I tell you, it was an awful time, as I ever saw in my life. The woods caught fire and burned, the leaves on the ground, and it burned up for many a man. Oh, it was an awful sight I ever saw. I'll never forget that day, the Holy Sabbath day. It was the hardest day's work I ever did in my life. I tell you, we completely routed them. And on Monday, it commenced raining, and that night we crossed the river. They crossed the river. I tell you, I was glad as a soul as I ever saw in my life. At last, we had a great many of our fellow soldiers behind, never to return again. I do feel sorry to relate about the death of Robert Barnes and Milton Ray, and he was killed at Chancellorsville. And according to the records, he was in a desperate charge on the enemy's batteries, and he was shot through the head and many balls in his left eye. But it has pleased Almighty God for them to fall. I hope their souls are at rest. In his last letter, which was written in August of 1863, he does talk about, it's probably the only time Sergeant Yarman got political in his writings. He says, I never want to go back into the Union again. I would rather go back to France. Now that's referring to his Huguenot ancestry. I would rather go back to France as go to old age, for if we are subjugated people, our liberty is done forever, and all of our property taken and divided amongst the Yankees. I do hope that God will grant success to our cause. Now, Sergeant Yarman was wounded at the Battle of Snicker's Gap. It's also called the Battle of Cool Springs, Castleman's Ferry, Island Ford, Parker's Ford, or Snicker's Ferry. It was fought in July of 1864 in Clark County, Virginia. For if you don't know the geography there, it's located in Virginia on the West Virginia state line on the Shenandoah River. The family oral history has when the family had gotten word that Sergeant Darman was wounded and on his way home by train, they went to meet him at the returning train and only found that he had died in transit. Aaron Darman and his wife Nancy are buried at the old cemetery of Sardis Associated Reformed Presbyterian Church, Sardis, on Sardis Road in Charlotte. And the following appears on his gravestone. Aaron D. Armand died August 19, 1864, aged 37 years, 6 months, and 4 days. Among the many thousands of doers of Southern chivalry who offered up their lives as a willing sacrifice upon their country's altar, he falls a victim. Unveil thy bosom, faithful tomb, take this new treasure to thy trust, and give the sacred relics room to slumber in the silent dust. Nancy, his wife, his widow, lived for another 49 years. She died in April of 1913. A tender mother and faithful friend. In one of General Lee's last letters, he wrote to Colonel Charles Marshall, which is one of Robert E. Lee's aides. He says, "The truth is this. The march of Providence is so slow, our desire so impatient. The work of progress is so immense, and our means of aiding it so feeble. The life of humanity is so long, that of the individual so brief, that we often see the ebb of the advancing wave and are thus discouraged. It is history that teaches us to hope." Now, like many of you, I had two ancestors, many ancestors that fought in the war. Two of them, just like these gentlemen, did not make it. Samuel Porter Hillhouse, a sergeant in Company I, 2nd South Carolina Rifles from Anderson, was buried at Old City Cemetery in Lynchburg. He did not make it home to his family. And then my namesake, my great-great-grandfather, James Green, was in Company H, also the 30th North Carolina. In May, had even saw Sergeant Darman, was captured at Spotsylvania Courthouse. He died at Elmira Prison Camp in October of '64 and is buried at Woodlawn National Cemetery. He also did not make it home to his family. So just like the soldiers buried here, I pray that we all make it home to our family. Thank you, Brian, for allowing me to be here. And so turn it over.
Okay, at this time, as soon as my fingers work here, we'd like to recognize Mr. Tim Green for his contribution today with a letter of appreciation. Whereas those individuals and organizations under conscious of their obligation to our nation and preservation of its true history. Whereas, in fulfilling this great obligation, they gave a force of strengthening the basic foundations of American liberty. Now, therefore, it is resolved that Mountain Island Preservation Society expresses its way of gratitude and appreciation for unestimable gratitude, which we have accrued for a cordial relationship together. We present this to Mr. Timothy Green. I'll walk out there.
Thanks, sir. I do want to put, don't have anything in jars.
Honor guard. Where is it going? Got Brian go tell you about the cross. You're as good as just short.
This cross was recovered down in Lancaster, South Carolina, and its original Stonewall Jackson chapter 220. That's a UDC chapter in Charlotte, and we've had it fixed up. And when we get a chance, this cross right here is going over on Sergeant DeArmond's grave. So we couldn't figure out a better place to put it. So when we get around to it, after we get through some of these other services, we're going over there and place it, because I know we went over there New Year's Day and he don't have a cross. So I just thought I'd let everyone know about this, right? If anyone was wondering.
Also, one other quick announcement. Mr. John Ellis was supposed to have been here today, been our bugler for TAPS, but him and the bugle are not here. He had to go to a funeral for a friend of his, so keep him in your prayers. Also, Donnie Rayburn was here earlier, but Shauna, her name's Shauna? Shauna got sick and they had to rush her to the emergency room. So keep her in your prayers as well. All right, now time, honor guard, make ready.
Shoulder arms. Honor guard, make ready. Take aim. Fire! Reload. Honor guard, make ready. Take aim. Fire! Honor guard, make ready. Take aim. Fire! Recover. Arms. Shoulder. Arms. Present. Arms. Shoulder. Arms.
May proceed with the bagpipes. Who wants to lead out in Dixie?
Oh, I wish I was in the land of cotton, old times there, not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. In Dixieland, where I was born, early on the frosty morn. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. And I wish I was in Dixie, hooray, hooray. In Dixieland, I'll take my stand to live and die in Dixie. Away, away, away down south in Dixie. Away, away, away down south in Dixie. Woo!
That concludes our service for today. We're going to have a raffle drawing here right now. We're going to need somebody to videotape. We might do it right over here.
Who wants to videotape this for me?
You want to videotape it?
Yeah. Do you videotape this?
See, sir.
Yeah.
Great again.
That way, we are raffling off a shotgun, and the funds that we get from the shotgun, we're going to get a monument put over here for the Lanier brothers. That's another sad story. They were they're from up the Catawba River area up there in Hickory, and so you need to come here and draw the ticket. You. we need to get a neutral party now. So this is going to be it. There's 100 tickets in here, and they're all mixed up. Now I need you to reach in and grab a ticket. Not that one. It don't matter. Now, all right.
Coleslaw.
Lori Rogers. What you colored?
Okay.
You know what to do.
All right. So Lori Rogers won the shotgun. We'll get that. We'll get that to her, and I guess that's about it.
I knew she had better luck than me.
Everybody for coming here today on this beautiful day.